Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Shivering Mouse. I'm so excited to have you here today. Today we're going to go ahead and continue our story with Shasta in The Horse and His Boy. So without further ado, let me find it here. Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis. This chapter is The Fight at Anvard. About 11 o'clock, the whole company was once more on the march, riding westward with the mountains on their left. Corin and Shasta rode at the right at the rear, with the giants immediately in front of them. Lucy and Edmund and Peregrine were busy with their plans for battle, and though Lucy once said, "But where is his Glooskap Highness?" Edmund only replied, "Not in the front, which is good news enough. Leave well enough alone." Shasta told Corin most of his adventures, and explained that he had learned all his riding from a horse and didn't really know how to use the reins. Corin instructed him in this, besides telling him all about their secret sailing from Tashbaan. "And where is the Queen Susan?" "At Cair Paravel," said Corin. "She's not like Lucy, you know, who's as good as a man, or at any rate as good as a boy. Queen Susan is more like an ordinary grown-up lady. She doesn't ride into the wars, though she is an excellent archer." The hillside path which they were following became narrower all the time, and the drop on their right hand became steeper. At last they were going in a single-file line along the edge of a precipice, and Shasta shuddered to think of that he had done the same thing last night without noting it. But of course, he thought, I was quite safe. That's why the lion kept on my left. He was between me and the edge the whole time. Then the path went left and south, away from the cliff, and there were thick woods on both sides of it, and they went steeply up into the pass. There would have been a splendid view from the top if it were open ground, but among all the trees you could see nothing, only every now and then some huge pinnacle of rock above the tree-tops, and an eagle or two wheeling high up in the blue air. "They smell battle," said Corin, pointing at the birds. "They know, and they know we're preparing to feed for them." Shasta didn't like this at all. When they had crossed the neck of the pass and came a good deal lower, they reached more open ground, and from here Shasta could see all of Archenland, blue and hazy and spread out below him, even though, he thought, a hint of the desert beyond it. But the sun, which had perhaps 2 hours or so left to go before it set, was in his eyes, and he couldn't make things out distinctly. Here the army halted and spread out in a line, and there was a great deal of rearranging. A whole detachment of very dangerous-looking talking beasts whom Shasta had not noticed before, and who were mostly of the cat kind, leopards, panthers, and the like, went padding and growling to take up their positions on the left. The giants were ordered to the right, and before going there, they all took off something that they had been carrying on their backs and sat down for a moment. Then Shasta saw what they had been carrying and were now putting down were pairs of boots, horrid, heavy, spiked boots, which came up to their knees. Then they sloped their huge clubs over their shoulders and marched to their battle position. The archers, with Queen Lucy, fell to the rear, and you could first see them bending their bows and then hear the twang, twang as they tested the strings, and wherever you looked you could see people tightening girths, putting on helmets, drawing swords, and throwing cloaks to the ground. There was hardly any talking now. It was very solemn and very dreadful. "I'm in for it now. I'm really in for it now," thought Shasta. Then there came noises far ahead, the sound of many men shouting, and steady thud, thud, thud. "A battering ram," whispered Corin. "They're battering the gate." Even Corin looked quite serious now. "Why doesn't King Edmund get on? I can't stand this waiting. Chilly, too." Shasta nodded, hoping he didn't look as frightened as he felt. The trumpet at last, and on the move, now trotting, the banner streaming out in the wind. They had topped the low ridge now, and below them was the whole scene suddenly opened out, a little many-towered castle with its gate towards them, no moat, unfortunately, but of course the gate was shut and the portcullis was down. On the walls they could see, like little white dots, the faces of the defenders. Down below, about 50 of the collarmans dismounted and were steadily swinging a great tree trunk against the gate. But at once the scene changed. The main bulk of Rabadash's men had been on foot ready to assault the gate, but now he had seen the Narnians sweeping down from the ridge. There was no doubt that those collarmen were wonderfully trained. It seemed to Shasta only a second before the whole line of the enemy were on horseback again, wheeling around to meet them, and swinging towards them. And now a gallop. The ground between the two armies grew less every moment, faster, faster, all swords out now, all shields up to the nose, all prayers said, all teeth clenched. Shasta was dreadfully frightened, but it suddenly came to his mind, if you mess this up, you'll mess up every battle your whole life, now or never. But when at last the two lines met, he had really very little idea of what happened. There was a frightful collision and an appalling noise. His sword was knocked clean out of his hand pretty quickly, and he had got the reins tangled somehow. Then he found himself slipping. Then a spear came right at him, and as he ducked to avoid it, he rolled right off his horse, bashed his left knuckles pretty terribly against someone else's armor, and then... But it's no use trying to describe the battle from Shasta's point of view. He understood too little of the fight in general, and even his own part in it. The best way I can tell you what really happened is to take you some miles away where the Hermit of the Southern March sat. Hang on. There we go. Where the Hermit of the Southern March sat gazing into a smooth pool beneath the spreading tree, with Bree, Hwin, and Aravis beside him. For it was in this pool that the hermit looked when he wanted to know what was going on in the world outside the grass walls of his hermitage. There was, as in a mirror, he could see at certain times what was going on in the streets of cities further south than Tashbaan, or what whips were putting into Red Haven in the remote Seven Isles, or what robbers or wild beasts stirred in the great western forest between Lantern Waste and Talmar. And all this day he had hardly left his pool, even to eat or drink, for he knew that the great events were afoot in Archenland. Aravis and the horses gazed in it too. They could see it was a magic pool. Instead of reflecting the tree and the sky, it revealed cloudy, colored shapes, moving, always moving in its depths. But they could see nothing clearly. The hermit could. From time to time he told them what he saw. A little while before Shasta rode into his first battle, the hermit had begun speaking like this. I see 1, 2, 3 eagles wheeling in by the gap at Stormness Head. One is the oldest of all the eagles. He would not be out unless battle was at hand. I see him wheel to and fro, peering down sometimes at Anvard and sometimes to the east, behind the Stormness. Ah! I see now what Rabadash and his men have been busy at all day. They have felled and lopped a great tree, and now are coming from the woods carrying it as a ram. They have learned something from the failure of last night's assault. He would have been wiser if he had set his men to making ladders, but it takes too long, and he is impatient, fool that he is. He ought to have ridden back to Tashbaan as soon as his first attack failed, for his whole plan depended on the speed and surprise. Now they're bringing their ram into position. King Loon's men are shooting hard from the walls. 5 collarmen have fallen, but not many will. They have their shields above their heads. Rabadash is giving his orders now. With him are most of his trusted lords, fierce Tarkans from eastern provinces. I can see their faces. There is Corridon of Castle Tormont, Azru and Chalamash, and Iglamuth with the twisted lip, and a tall Tarkan with a crimson beard. By the main, that's my old master, Amradan, said Bree. Shh, said Aravis. And now the ram has started. If I could hear it as well as see, what a noise that would make. Stroke after stroke, and no gate can stand it forever. But wait! Something up by the Stormness has scared the birds. They're coming in out of the masses, and wait again, I can't see it yet. Now I can. The whole ridge up on the east is black with horsemen. Now if only the wood would catch that standard and spread it out. They're over the ridge now, whoever they are. Oh, I've seen the banner now. It's Narnia! Narnia! It's the Red Lion. They're in full career down the hill now. I can see King Edmund. And there's a woman behind the archers. Oh! What is it? Said Hwin breathlessly. All his cats are dashing out from the left line. Cats, said Aravis. Great cats, leopards and such, said the hermit impatiently. I see. The cats are coming round the circle to get at the horses of the dismounted men. That's a good stroke. The collarman horses are mad with terror already. Now the cats are among them, but Rabadash has reformed his line and has 100 men in saddle. They're riding to meet the Narnians. There's only 100 yards between the two lines. Now, only 50. I can see King Edmund. I can see Lord Peridon. There are 2 mere children in the Narnian line. What can the king be about to let them into battle? Now only 10 yards. The lines have met. The giants on the Narnians' right, doing wonders, but one's down, shot through the eye, I suppose. The center's all in the middle. I can see more on the left. There are the two boys again, lying alive. One is Prince Corin, and the other is as like him as two peas. It's your little Shasta. Corin is fighting like a man. He's killed a collarman. I can see a bit of the center now. Rabadash and Edmund have almost met, but the press has separated them. What about Shasta? Said Aravis. Oh, the fool, groaned the hermit. Poor little brave fool. He knows nothing about this work. He's making no use at all of his shield. His whole side's exposed. He hasn't the faintest idea what to do with his sword. Oh, he's remembered it now. He's waving it wildly about, nearly cut his own pony's head off, and he will in a moment if he's not careful. It's been knocked out of his hand now. It's mere murder sending a child into battle. He can't live 5 minutes. Duck, you fool! Oh, he's down. Killed? Asked all three voices breathlessly. How can I tell? Said the hermit. The cats have done their work. All of the riderless horses are dead, or escaped now. No retreat for the collarmans on them. Now the cats are turning back to the main battle. They're leaping on the ramsman. The ram is down. Oh, good, good! The gates are opening from the inside. There's going to be a real battle. The first three are out. It's King Lune in the middle. The brothers Dare and Darren on each side of him. Behind them are Tran and Shar and Cole with his brother Colin. There are 10, 20, nearly 30 of them out by now. The collarman line is being forced back upon them. King Edmund is dealing marvelous strokes. He's just slashed Corridon's head off. Lots of collarmans have thrown down their arms and are running for the woods. Those that remain are hard-pressed. The giants are closing in on the right, the cats on the left, and King Lune from their rear. The collarmans are a little knot now, fighting back to back. Your Tarkin's down, Bree. Lune and Azru are fighting hand in hand, and the king looks like he's winning. The king is keeping it up well. The king has won. Azru's down. King Edmund is down. Nope, he's up again. He's at it with Rabadash. They're fighting in the very gate of the castle. Several collarmans have surrendered. Darren has killed Igamith. I can't see what happened to Rabadash. I think he's dead. He's leaning against the castle wall, but I don't know. Chalamash and the King Edmund are still fighting, but the battle is over everywhere else. Chalamash has surrendered. The battle is over, and the collarmans are utterly defeated. Shasta fell off his horse, and he gave himself up for lost, but the horses, even in battle, tread on human beings very much less than you would suppose. After a few horrible 10 minutes or so, Shasta realized suddenly that there were no longer any horses stamping about in the immediate neighborhood, and that the noise, for there were still a good many noises going on, was no longer that of a battle. He sat up and stared about him. Even he, as little as he knew of battles, could see that the Archenlanders and Narnians had won. The only living collarmans he could see were prisoners. The castle gates were wide open, and King Lune and King Edmund were shaking hands across the battering ram. From the circle of lords and warriors around them there arose the sound of breathless and excited, but obviously cheerful, conversation. And then suddenly it all united and swelled into a great roar of laughter. Shasta picked himself up, feeling uncommonly stiff, and ran towards the sound to see what the joke was. A very curious sight met his eyes. The unfortunate Rabadash appeared to be suspended from the castle walls. His feet, which were about 2 feet from the ground, were kicking wildly. His chain shirt had somehow hitched up so that it was horribly tight under the arms and came halfway over his face. In fact, he looked just as a man looks if you catch him in the very act of getting into a stiff shirt that is a little too small for him. As far as could be made out afterwards, and you may be sure the story was well talked over for many days, what had happened was something like this. Early in the battle, one of the giants had made an unsuccessful stomp at Rabadash with his spiked boots. Unsuccessful because it didn't crush Rabadash, which was what the giant had intended, but was not quite useless, as one of the spikes tore the chainmail just as you or I might tear an ordinary shirt. So Rabadash, by the time he encountered Edmund at the gate, had a hole in the back of his chainmail. And when Edmund pressed him back nearer and nearer to the wall, he jumped up on a mounting block and stood there, raining down blows on Edmund from above. But then, finding that this position, by raising him above the heads of everyone else, made him a mark for every arrow of the Narnian bows, decided to jump down again, and he meant it to look and sound, no doubt for a moment he did look and sound, very, very grand and dreadful, as he jumped, crying, "The bolt of Tash falls from above!" But he had to jump sideways because the crowd in front of him had left no landing place in that direction. And then, in the neatest way you could possibly wish, the tear in the back of his chainmail caught on a hook in the wall. Ages ago this hook had a ring on it for tying horses to, and there he found himself, like a piece of wash hang up to dry, and everyone was laughing at him. "Let me down, Edmund," howled Rabadash. "Let me down and fight me like a king and a man, or if you are too great a coward to do that, kill me at once." "Certainly," began King Edmund, but King Loon interrupted. "By your majesty's good leave," said King Loon to Edmund. "Not so." Then, turning to Rabadash, he said, "Your Royal Highness, if you had given that challenge a week ago, I'll answer for it there was no one in King Edmund's dominion, from the High King down to the smallest talking mouse, who would have refused it. But by attacking our castle in Anvard in a time of peace, without defiance sent, you have proven yourself no knight, but a traitor, and one rather to be whipped by a hangman than to be suffered to cross swords by any person of honor. Take him down and bind him, carry him within until our pleasure is further known." Strong hands wrenched Rabadash's sword from him, and he was carried away to the castle, shouting and threatening, cursing, and even crying, for though he could have faced torture, he couldn't bear being made ridiculous. In Tashbaan, everyone had always taken him seriously. At that moment, Corin ran up to Shasta, seized his hand, and started dragging him towards King Loon. "Here he is, father, here he is!" cried Corin. "Aye, and here thou art at last," said the king in a very gruff voice, "and hast been in battle, clean contrary to your obedience. A boy to break a father's heart. At your age, a rod between your breech were fitter than a sword in your fist. Ha!" But everyone, including Corin, could see that the king was actually very proud of him. "Chide him no more, sire, if it please you," said Lord Darren. "His Highness would not be your son if he did not inherit your conditions. It would grieve your majesty more if he had to be reproved for the opposite fault." "Well, well," grumbled the king, "we'll pass over it for this time. And now," what came next surprised Shasta as much as anything that had ever happened to him in his life. He found himself suddenly embraced in a bear-like hug by King Loon, and kissed on both cheeks. Then the king set him down again, and said, "Stand here, boys, and let all the court see you. Hold up your heads. Now, gentlemen, look at them both. Has any of you any doubts?" And still Shasta could not understand why everyone stared at him and Corin, nor what all the cheering was about. Next week will be Chapter 14, How Bree Became a Wiser Horse. And hopefully, around then, my computer will be up and running again, so I'll have this back on the regular podcast for my patrons back at patreon.com/shiveringmouse, so they will again be behind the paywall, and the patrons only will be able to have access to this content. I also tend to read it more at like 3 or 4 chapters at a time when I do it on Patreon, just because without the video it takes up a lot less space, so I can add a lot more content to it at that time. So I look forward to having this computer repaired as quickly as possible, and I'll keep you posted on that as it goes. The puppies are asleep, so I guess I better move on. Have a wonderful day.